Hello, I'm Forrest Elder, and I'm here with Thomas Elder, who was a brakeman, a switchman, and a flagman from 1964 till 1967 with the Seaboard Airline. And I'm going to ask some questions. Could you start by telling me how you first came to work for the Seaboard Airline and what factors influenced your decision to pursue railroad work?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to tell you without maybe going into just a little bit of history. Back in 1964, I had recently graduated from high school, and I guess I would have to admit that financially my family was, I guess, on the poor side. So to continue my education, I needed funds. I was told by a relative of mine that there was a good possibility of working for the railroad and that the railroad paid quite well. So I went and applied, and I was accepted for work by the railroad, and they understood of my desire to continue my education in college. So they were very nice, and they agreed that I could work what's kind of known as a co-op student, where I would work part of the time for the railroad, and then I would go to school part of the time and go back and forth like that. As a child growing up, I've always loved trains, but I like toy trains. I liked the real thing, and I think that probably affected my decision to work for the railroad. I did not mind working in all kinds of weather and all kinds of situations, outdoor work. So and the railroad did pay very well. I could work for several months, and then I could leave and go to school for several months, and then go back to the railroad. And I did this on and off for a couple of 3 years or so there. So that's kind of how I got started with the railroad.
Would you say it was difficult to get a job with the Seaboard?
I don't. My personal experience was not so. I had no difficulty whatsoever. I think one thing was because I was, you might say, recommended for the job by a family member, and that the railroad was, and of course, when we say the railroad, that's what we're really talking about here. Is we're talking about the people, the people that I talked to at the railroad, the type of people they were, the good people. They realized that it's expensive to go to college, and they were more than willing to work with me to let me work there and then go to school some, and then come back and work there some more, and go to school and come back. But for the average public, it might be kind of difficult to get on, as they say, with the railroad, because the railroad is really, it's really railroad people are family. You know, that's, as I was thinking not too long ago, you know, there was a book, I believe by Ambrose, I think that's who it was, called Band of Brothers. Railroad employees are like a band of brothers, and not just a emotional band, but in many cases with the railroad, it was really family. It was fathers and sons and uncles and nephews. These people were family related to one another. And I've actually heard some folks say that you couldn't get on, you could not get a job with the railroad unless you already had a family member working there. And that actually there may be some truth to that. But, you know, anyway, it wasn't difficult for me, but that's not to say that it was not difficult for other people, because it may have been.
When you first started as working for the railroad, did you have an early impression of it, and did that change over time, or did it more or less stay the same the whole time you were there?
I cannot think of any right now. I don't have any particular recollection of an early impression. So I think I would have to say that it was consistent, or my impression of the company and the job and the people that I worked with. Basically, it was constant from beginning to end.
Would you say that becoming an employee of the railroad required you to learn many new skills?
You know, I suppose so, but I don't know. It's hard. It's hard to say. Trying to think back that many years ago. Yeah, I mean, there's always, anytime a person goes to a completely new job, and you got to remember what we're talking about here. We're talking about an 18-year-old. So I was not a person who had a previous experience really with anything. It's kind of a hard question. Anyway, okay. I think my impression, as I say, was constant. I love working there on the first day, and the last day I worked there, I love working there, and I'll always feel that way.
What skills or personal traits do you think the railroad valued most in its employees?
You know, you're asking me a question that the company is what does the company and again, I have to go back and say that as at the lower level that I was at, and the Can you restate the question just a little bit, maybe, or?
Well, do you think that, railroads are pretty famous for their punctuality? Do you think the railroad really tried to instill in people a stronger sense of punctuality than another job might do.
I guess I understood back in those days. There were the trains, all the trains, whether they be passenger trains or freight trains, ran on a schedule. Now, when you run on a schedule, that is very important. It certainly is not a job like I hear about today with a lot of construction workers, for an example, just using that as an example, that they love to, they don't show up for work on Monday and all that kind of stuff, or they take Fridays off to whatever. But so yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, because of that schedule, and some I've even heard that they've used the word tight schedule, and I mean it runs on a minute by minute kind of a thing as far as when they expect a train to leave and when that train is expected to be at different points or destinations along. And of course, now in the job that I was doing, I was not the engineer or the conductor of the train, so I did not have that responsibility. But as if someone had wanted to make a lifetime job, a career, then yes, that would be that type of thing would be very important. In fact, that might for the jobs like I was doing, that was I could say that was a very important thing.
Railroad culture is often described as close-knit and tradition-heavy. How did the company culture shape how people approached work there?
Another interesting question. Okay, I think as I alluded to before, the culture was extremely close-knit. I'm not sure, other than maybe certain groups, or maybe even most or all groups in the military would be similar. I'm not sure. I mean, there may be, but I have not experienced any other job with a culture like the railroad. As I said, everyone in typically, and yes, there are exceptions. There are exceptions in real families. But no, everyone in the railroad considers fellow employees as family.
What was your general impression or your dealings with the union?
Well, at my level, and also being, as I say, what would be generally back in those days called a co-op students, I really had no contact or really, nothing. No contact with the union at all. Of course, I realized that the union, I guess years and years ago, the unions were formed, and they represented the employees as a group, as opposed to individuals representing themselves to the company. So the union had set work rules having to do with what you could and could not, what the company could ask you to do and or not do. They also set the pay, your pay for and it was a group representation, and of course I realized and knew all of that, but I really had no interaction, specifically with the union.
Railroad workers are often faced with dangerous work conditions. Do you think the Seaboard did a good job of preparing its employees for those conditions?
Oh, absolutely. Oh my goodness. And this goes way beyond just the Seaboard Railroad, and I think this culture still exists today. Back then, in particular, the railroads, and I mean all railroads, but and certainly I mean the Seaboard. That's my railroad, but they used the cabooses, which were company cars on the trains, on the freight trains. They used them as billboards to promote safety. I don't think I've ever seen a caboose that didn't have some kind of a slogan, some kind of a safety slogan, painted on the side of the caboose in big letters to remind the employees of safety. Just all kind of things. I'm sure if someone wanted to, you can research that. You can Google it today, but it might be something like "Watch your step." Safety is everyone's responsibility. So, yes, they did. They were very, very careful or whatever about safety, and that was good.
Do you think any state or federal regulations affected your work overly much?
That's I have to say, obviously, because of and this would be kind of like the safety stuff that we were just talking about. State and federal regulations, of course, would encompass all kinds of things, safety included. But so I was not specifically aware of a lot of different, say, federal regulations, although I knew that those regulations existed. But the between the federal government, its regulations, and the company, I was really not aware of all these different regulations. Now, what I would have been aware of would be what the company culture was in different all these different regards that these regulations may have regulated. And again, the safety thing is a good example of that. So I'm sure the federal authorities handed down rules and regulations, and then the company in turn informed us of what these rules and regulations would be. But that was for the employees at my level anyway, it was just the rules that you went by working there. So that's about my only interaction with any kind of state or federal regulation.
From your perspective, how did competition from highway trucking or other railroads affect the volume of freight that you saw on the railroad?
Okay, I had no, knowledge, I guess you'd say, of of these things, really. Now, as far as what I did have in regard to this type of thing is the just in general, okay, the overall economy. I could feel whether the economy was doing, and I'm talking about the economy of the United States of America, okay. I had a feeling for how the economy was doing. That would, one thing I could tell by the level of traffic that we had, kind of how the economy was doing. Of course, I would hear about the economy on the radio news, but they kind of went hand in hand. If there was a downturn in the economy, then I could see that we had less traffic. Our trains were shorter, and when with an upturn in the economy, then I can detect that as a railroad employee, because sometimes we had to run extra trains. I'll give this one example. We used to have a fast freight that came from Virginia and ran all the way to down to Birmingham, Alabama, and it came through Atlanta. And when the economy was doing well, and this train I'm talking about, it was trains back then were numbered and ran on a schedule, and I think I alluded to the schedule thing before. But one of our premier freight trains was number 27, and number 27 was what was considered a fast freight. I mean, it ran 70, 75 miles an hour, and it only stopped at the major big cities. It did not stop and set off cars at any other places other than the major yards in the big cities. Well, again, let me go back. When the economy took a nice upturn, they had to run two. That's TWO, two number 27s. The first one was called First 27, and as you might guess, the second one was called Second 27. And first and second 27s ran about 15 minutes apart. That means second 27 was following first 27 about 15 minutes behind. And that's because of the increased traffic, the increased freight traffic. So you could certainly see the economy reflected in the in the amount of cargo that we were moving.
What would you say the Seaboard Airlines reputation was with the general public?
Boy, that's a hard question. That's I think the general public, and I really mean the general public too, not anyone who followed railroad or railroads or enthusiasts, just the general public. The general public doesn't care anything at all about the railroad. The only time the general public thinks about the railroad is in a local area where there has been an accident. And from my personal experience, and I'm talking about through years now of growing up, shall we say, and working there and so forth and so forth, I find that the general public wants to get angry, and as a general rule, nobody takes the side of the railroad. except me. And I'm not talking about other railroad employees now. No, anytime an automobile meets a train, the automobile loses. And certainly, and I kind of understand the family of anyone who was seriously injured or killed by a train. I understand that, how they could be angry. But it's not the railroad's fault. I mean, I don't know. It seems so illogical to me that someone can pull up with children in the car, and the crossbars are down, the red lights are flashing, the bells are ringing, and here comes a train, and they decide, well, they're in just such a big hurry, they'll just pull around the crossbars and drive across the tracks. They think they can outrun the train. I guess that's what it is. It's a race. And they give it a try, and I guess a lot of times people win, and other times people lose. But I see no justification for when the people deliberately do that, and then the family members are angry at the railroad for what's happened. It's not the railroad's fault.
Were there any significant technological changes, like equipment upgrades or new signaling systems during your time working?
Not particularly. During those years when I was there, I would say the technology was fairly stable and consistent. Now, at that time, the Seaboard was starting to use more handheld communication devices, i.e., walkie-talkies. That was really just starting to come about. Now, it's not that the railroad didn't have radios. The railroad did have radios, but the radios back then, the radios used, if anybody knows today what I'm fixing to say, they use vacuum tubes. Okay, vacuum tubes relied on high voltage. For a vacuum tube to function inside a radio, and so a two-way radio can work, it has to have 250 volts is the high voltage on one of the elements in the vacuum tube. So the offices where you had a 115 volts AC wall plug that you could plug a radio into, they had a radio. Obviously, the diesel engines had big generators on there that generated extreme amount of current, and 400 volts and so forth. So they could run the radios that were in production at that time. But as far as just a radio that you could use, clip to your hip and pull it off, and a battery operated thing, those that existed were super expensive, and they were not robust as far as for reliability and so forth, and under the work conditions, environment of moving trains and building trains and so forth, that they just weren't there yet. So, but they were starting to come into use. And technology-wise, really, I mean, that's about all I can think of during that, say, 4-year period.
Can you think of a time where you were under a lot of pressure or were in a difficult situation while working?
No, I cannot. I cannot. Well, I guess first thing, because I wasn't at the level that I was, all I had to do is just do my job, and that's I was not in any type of leadership or command position, so I had no responsibility for anyone other than myself to do my job as best I could, and that kind of thing. So I can't say that I ever, right now, I don't remember ever feeling any pressure or being in any really what you would say is a bad situation or whatever. I guess some of the upper management may have had such situations imposed on them, but not for me.
Looking back, did your time with the Seaboard influence your later career or the way you approached opportunities in your life?
No, I don't really think so. I don't really think so. That I guess I could talk for a long, long time, about that, and you don't have the time, want the time, or even want to hear it all. So, but just no. But I'll tell you, and this is a little off the subject. I'll tell you what did influence my career choice. It's called the Vietnam War. It's called the draft, the United States government draft. That's what influenced my career choices. In addition to, as I said, I for whatever reason, I guess it's in my genes. Okay, and I'm talking about family genes now, not Levi's. Anyway, I've always loved trains. I've always loved the railroad, and when the war came along, if I had just stayed with the railroad, I would have been drafted in the Army and sent to Vietnam, and that's the bottom line. When I first started out, I had a student deferment, but I actually ended up working a little more for the railroad than I was going to college. So I lost my student deferment, and then I got set up for the draft, and in addition to that, in addition to loving the railroad, I've always loved electronics, any kind of electronics, radios, TVs, everything to do with electronic type things. When I was forced to make a decision because of the war, I decided that it would be better for me to join a branch of the military service where I could get the electronic education that I desired. And so that's what I did. And when I left the military, I went to work for a company in this area. It was called Scientific Atlanta, and I really got into the electronics that as I loved. And eventually, when I started out in a department called checkout, which we had to completely check and evaluate and align all the electronic equipment that this company made before it was sent to the customer. Because when it was sent to the customer, which would be like the United States Air Force, it had to work first time every time. So, I mean, it wasn't stuff that was just thrown together and sent out. But then, not too long after working in that and gaining experience in that, I moved into engineering. And I basically became an engineering associate in research and development of new electronic products. I say all this because I don't know, you may not be aware now, but during that time, I was guaranteed a job. When I quit the railroad and joined the military, I was told that I think I didn't have much. I think it was a fairly short time, but I think I had maybe 30 days after I was discharged. If I went back to the railroad and get my job back automatically. So when I got out, I thought about the different pros and cons. I thought about obviously how much I enjoyed and loved working for the railroad, but I weighed that against the, as they say, the cons, and there are quite a few cons to that, which would affect my personal life. So I decided that my career was going to be electronics. And I made that decision. I've never looked back, and I'm glad I did.
What would you say some of the cons to working for the railroad were?
Ooh. Okay. I mean, maybe not all that many, but as a young person, I did not mind working in the rain. I did not mind working all night in the dark. I did not mind working in the hot summertime. Again, all this is outdoor work. I mean, the only people that sit in an office is upper management that do the railroad. Railroad people are, and that goes everybody from the people out there pounding spikes into rails on the track, and the people who maintain the signals. And see, I kind of thought about that too. Maybe I could switch in the railroad and go to the signal portion. That would be electrical and electronic stuff. Anyway, I didn't make that decision. Okay, that, and I guess the major thing that prompted me to go into electronics as opposed to back to the railroad was the railroad is a 24-hour a day, 364 days a year job. Remember, I said 24 hours a day. Okay, there was one 24-hour period that the railroad did not work, did not move. And that was from midnight Christmas Eve to midnight Christmas Day. We took Christmas Day off, but we worked. So also, if you're working on the main line, you will get on a train, and I'll just make up an example here, because I had a friend who worked for the Southern Railroad. You would get on a train in Atlanta. You would take it all the way, say, to Chattanooga or Macon, Georgia, or somewhere, and then you get off, and then you go to some cheapo motel and have to stay there, sleep there overnight, and then next morning you get up and get back on another train and you bring it back to Atlanta. Well, as you get older, you start to think about, well, there is a possibility of marriage, and also with that, there's a good possibility of children. And do you really want to spend, your time in some motel in Chattanooga, Tennessee, instead of being home with your family on these holidays? uh, in working, if I went into electronics, I'd be home every night. You know, I wouldn't miss family events. I would not miss, I wouldn't miss anything having to do with a normal person. So, you know, where you work 5 days a week, got 2 days off every weekend, you're home, you go to all the family events. So much of that with the railroad you miss. It's really a great job for a single person, for sure, you know, who doesn't, in particular, you know, I guess there are some people who don't cherish family as much as others, but I think that's the main, other than being away from your loved ones, and then again, as you get older, you may not working outside in the dark all night. You know, when it's 20 degrees, it might be a little tougher than when you were 18. So that's kind of my feelings on that.
Well, finally, and maybe as like a closing remark, are there any lessons or events from your time working with the Seaboard that have stuck with you or feel important to you?
Ooh, right now I can't events. I really can't think of any specific events that took place during that time that would, as you say, would be important or influenced, stuck with me in particular. I mean, when I think about those times, I guess I think about my railroad family during those times of the year, during those years. Is what I'm trying to say, because we were. Again, there's always one, maybe two exceptions, but everybody there was family, and it was such a great place to work. And being the age I was, and loving working outdoors at that particular time in my life, I really. I look back on it as a very enjoyable. It was just a great time in my life, and I guess maybe I'll just let it go at that.
All right. Well, I think that covers just about everything, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me about this.
Oh, anytime.